G'day there, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and congratulations to all of you. You've all done it. You've found the champ dog. So as always, we're going to be jumping into the arena in just a moment, but there's something we like to do first. We haven't been able to do for a little while, so here's to you guys. I don't know about you, but I really need this. So, as promised, we're going to be jumping into Alchemy today. I mentioned in my last video that Alchemy had now gone live and that over the weekend I was intending to play a few games and share some of that with you guys and share some first impressions of the format. I thought I would take advantage of the opportunity to keep another promise to you guys as well, because we're all about maximizing efficiency and value here. I've mentioned a couple of times in my Dimir Hullbreaker videos that I had a different build of the deck in mind that I was hoping to brew up and test out. So I thought jumping into a new format would be the perfect opportunity to put that together and see how it went. So what we're going to do today is, after this intro, we're going to hop on over into the arena. I'm going to talk you through the deck list and do a little bit of a deck tech, explain what the deck is about, go over some of the critical differences and how I'm hoping it'll work out. Then we're going to look at a couple of games. Then, after we've played a few games, I'm going to show you my newer, updated version of the deck. I've actually played with it a fair bit off camera. I've played a lot more games than I ended up recording, and I've made a few changes, and I'll explain to you some of those changes, the reasoning behind them, and what I'm thinking for the deck going forward, how I feel about it, and also give you some thoughts on the format so far. So that's what to expect. Why don't we go take a look at this deck? Behold, Hullbreaker 2.0. So the biggest and most immediate difference with this list is we're running the full 4 copies of Hullbreaker Horror, whereas our previous Dimir Hullbreaker list had a 2-2 split between Lear, Disciple of the Drowned, and the Hullbreaker Horror. So this introduces a couple of changes to our deck building approach. A lot of lists running Lear will stock up on bounce effects such as Fading Hope and Divide by Zero. However, for us, without access to Lear, and the inherent card advantage he provides, which negates some of the card disadvantage of a bounce effect, a card like Fading Hope is no longer as appealing to us because we're basically going down a card and slowing our opponent down, but we're not answering their card. And Hullbreaker Horror wants you to have cards in hand to cast once it hits the board. Similarly, Divide by Zero plays kind of double duty in lists running Lear, in that it both bounces permanents and also acts as a sort of sideways counterspell, which gets around Lear's restriction on not being able to counter spells. We don't run Lear, so we're less interested in a bouncer spell effect, and we're less interested in a bouncer permanent effect. So we are looking more into targeted removal, like Infernal Grasp here, like Power Word Kill. We're looking more at hard counters like Saw It Coming. And then to keep our hands stocked up, because we don't have access to Lear, we're also looking at a lot more card draw, such as Behold the Multiverse, such as Memory Deluge. So I have a 3-3 split of those. Our other hope with Behold the Multiverse is that we'll be able to foretell it and have ideally 1 or 2 copies of this still waiting in the foretell zone when we resolve a Hullbreaker Horror. And this gives us access to another cheap instant speed spell that doesn't require a target on the board, that allows us to trigger Hullbreaker Horror. Other than that, there's a lot of overlap between the two lists. I'm still running Dread Fugue because I like this card and I like this kind of effect. 4 Consider is kind of a no-brainer. It's a 1-mana instant speed spell. It requires no target. It gives you card filtering. It's the perfect card to trigger a Hullbreaker Horror. So ideally we can get to 8 mana, flash in a Hullbreaker Horror, and have a Consider held up to either protect the horror if we need to, or interrupt our opponent's plans if that's what we want to do. We've obviously got the similar targeted removal package because we're in the same colors. We're running some similar sweepers in Path of Peril and Meathook Massacre. We're still running Celestis to help us ramp. You'll see I've got 1 sneaky copy of Malakir Rebirth. That is just in here to be a land most of the time. But if we're up against a deck with targeted removal, this can help us protect our horror. Even if we're not against removal spells, this is something, if we have a Hullbreaker Horror resolved, we can just target the horror, we lose a bit of life, but it gets us that trigger off the horror. It's just another 1-mana instant that we can cast to get value off of the Hullbreaker. Now, this deck list is fairly streamlined. There's less actual individual cards to go over. Part of that is because we're running a lot of card draws, so we're ideally hoping to see our cards more often. We don't need like 6 to 8 copies of targeted removal spells because we're seeing a lot more of our deck through all of our card draw. And we also have a lot of card selection built into our draw spells. Consider not actually card draw. There's no card advantage in this, but it does let us see 2 cards deep if we need to. It helps us filter our draws. Memory Deluge combines filtering and card draw, as does Behold the Multiverse, because you scry 2, then draw 2 cards. So hopefully our draws are going to be smoother. Our deck can be a little more streamlined, and hopefully we can get a little more consistency in getting to our horrors and being able to execute our game plans rather than waiting for turn after turn to hope that we top deck one. You can see here in the stats that we are running 24 lands. However, we've got a whole bunch of these Zendikar MDFCs. We've got 1 copy of Hagra Mauling just to give us access to another targeted removal effect in the off case we need it. We've got 1 copy of Malakir Rebirth, 3 copies of Dwari Disruption. So that is an extra 5 lands tucked away into our spell list here. So we've functionally got access to 29 lands and 2 Celestis to help us ramp and also produce mana if we need to. Otherwise, the plan of the deck's fairly similar. It's a control deck. We're trying to slow down our opponent, get through our deck, sculpt our hand to get the pieces that we need, slap down a Hullbreaker Horror, and take over the game. As with a lot of Hullbreaker Horror decks, you can ignore a lot of what your opponent is doing if it's not going to end the game quickly, because once Hullbreaker Horror hits the battlefield, if you're able to continue to cast spells, it really does negate a lot of what your opponent's done up to that turn. If they're playing to the board, but not putting pressure on your life total and not threatening to end the game quickly, you can just cast this once you get up to enough mana and bounce everything back to your opponent's hand. And all those turns that you spent just drawing cards, like churning through your deck, doesn't really matter. You've just undone several turns worth of your opponent's game plan. Against aggro, we're hoping that we'll draw just enough targeted removal to get us through to some of our sweepers, to slow down our opponent's onslaught, and again, get to Hullbreaker Horror and just kill them with it. That's the general game plan. So why don't we shuffle up, get into a couple of games, and we'll chat again after. And seems reasonable. It's definitely not amazing, but it's reasonable. Probably just Foretell Behold here. Could also have foretold Saw It Coming, but I think it's a better play cycle to foretell this guy. Hey, Team Pennant, wow. Yeah, I really do want to play around with some Strixhaven cards now. The reason I think foretelling this is a better play cycle is because this turn I can hold up Saw It Coming, or I can cast Behold the Multiverse. Whereas if I had foretold Saw It Coming, I would only be able to do that this turn. So this is just some sort of weird equipment deck. Yep, that's fine. Yeah. Definitely looks like a Boros equipment / artifacts matter. I don't think this is a good one to play though, unless they're really banking on Nahiri making tokens so they can equip it on the cheap. I don't love a tap land here, but I don't hate it. I'm going to play this. I would love to just get the tap land out of the way, but I think it's better to play this. So again, I've got that play cycle of hold up a counter spell or draw some cards. Even though I do have a full grip. I think I just save like counter spells and kill spells for the cards that matter. So we just kill this one. What do I want to do here? Like, I want to get these foretold at some point. But I kind of want to have this foretold, but not cast for the horror. So I don't know if this was entirely correct, but I'm going to go with it. I don't think I could have foretold this, but again, this way I've got either Memory Deluge or Saw It Coming held up. Obviously want to get this tapped. I don't think I need to be in a rush to cast Consider. One, two, three, four, five, six. I think I need to let this resolve. I really don't love it. I really do not love it. But otherwise, if I counter that, for all I know, they could land Nahiri. I forgot it gets haste. Should have thought about that. Yeah, that was a mistake. I should have counted it. Oopsie. So it's a 6/5. One. So if I meat hook next turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool. So I can meat hook it down to dead. Excellent. Excellent. All three of the Hullbreakers. Wonderful. Now, we do take another big hit. Oh, no, they chose to keep this as a... They chose to keep this as a equipment rather than turn it into a creature. Brunor's fine. Doesn't have haste. Okay, unfortunately, we've tapped out on lands, so... We kind of just die here, don't we? Need to find removal. Even if I find removal now, I can't cast it. Cool, so we just die here, sadly. Savage. This hand seems reasonable, and we get to be on the play. We can't cast Path of Peril as things stand. But we can Celestus on turn 3 so that we can cast it on turn 4. Which isn't great, but it's also not the worst thing in the world. Snow-covered island. Ooh, no Jwari. I was fully expecting a Jwari disruption there. I don't see Path of Peril being very good in an Izzet matchup. I mean, as much as we are in Alchemy, I still have to assume it's an Izzet deck. Sure. I really want that learn trigger. I mean, if they hadn't cast that, it means they're doing nothing with their mana this turn cycle, so I don't think it's wrong to cast it. Mascot exhibition. Interesting. Sorry, just testing some potential lighting setups. Greedy, I know. Memory deluge of their own, I assume. Nope, unexpected windfall, okay. So they can cast a Hullbreaker Horror next turn. I cannot. And I assume that's what the end game of this deck is. Given that Epiphany's nerfed and it's day one of the format, I assume people would be testing out the Hullbreaker version instead. Just non-stop memory deluge. Honestly, I think I just take the lands here. Go on, go for it. Okay, no, just a memory deluge. Okay, so if it is a Hullbreaker Horror, they're waiting to hold something up and trying to play around my nonsense, which makes sense. Smoldering Egg, okay. No, so maybe they are still the Epiphany version. So I could horror into Dread Fugue to bounce something, but I don't know that that's actually the best use of my resources. I mean, hopefully they just tap out for something ridiculous and splashy here. Like an Epiphany. So I could have a... could have a horror of their own. That's not what I was going to say. I totally lost my train of thought. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, 9. So I have enough to horror and hold up Behold the Multiverse. Which seems good. Yep. We really don't care that much about them flipping this egg at this point. Ow, just bit myself really hard. That sucks. But yeah, the egg is not what this game is about right now. It's about how many divide by zeros and fading hopes and whatnot they have to hold off my horrors. And it looks like there might just be an Epiphany version, which is interesting choice. I mean, at some point people have to start testing Izzet Epiphany in this format and seeing how relevant the nerf actually is, because I don't think that, like, the nerf is probably a little bit more significant than it seems at first glance, but they were just trying to make a small decrease. So it's probably not enough to make this not still one of the top decks. So someone has to test it at some point. One, two, three, four, five, 6 mana our opponent still has access to. That is a lot. I'll take a piece of that action. I'll take a look in their hand. Bounce this dragon. I can start bouncing treasure tokens too soon. Okay, but they scoop. And yeah, makes sense. Looking at this hand, they're not winning this game. So they're still trying to do the iteration Epiphany combo. But yeah, looking at my hand versus their hand, it's not going to be good enough. I can bounce spells with horror, push through damage. Nice. Okay, so those are our games for today, guys. I know there was only the 2 and it was a little bit shorter, but I wanted to make sure I had time to talk to you about the deck before the games and have a chat to you after the games and show you my updated deck list. And I didn't want the video to end up being too long. So this is version 2.1. So we are running a few more sweepers in this version. We've got the extra copy of Shadow's Verdicts that we didn't have. And we've gone up to 2 copies of Meathook Massacre. The reason for this is mono white. So far, my experience on the Alchemy event queue has just been mono white as far as the eye can see. Everything the light touches is mono white. Just the same list that's been running around in standard queues. And I was getting run over a lot. Because this deck relies a bit more on draw spells, it doesn't have the early disruption in Fading Hope. It wasn't running as many sweepers. I was spending more turns just drawing through my deck, and I was finding my finishing cards, but these decks were able to apply just too much pressure so that by the time I resolved a Hullbreaker Horror, they could just attack around it and end up killing me. So I've lent into sweepers a little bit more. I've gone down to 3 copies of Hullbreaker Horror. It's an expensive card. Usually you only need to see 1 of them, maybe 2, and the shuffler just loved to serve me up 3. You'll also see I'm running Sorin the Mirthless. Now, I've only actually played a couple of games with Sorin. My reasoning here is he's good on a number of angles. Against other control decks or slower mid-range decks, he's a source of card advantage. He allows me to play to the board, so he produces creatures. He's something that sits on the board that my opponent has to deal with, so that I can draw removal spells or eat attacks and protect our life total. And even against aggro, he's not the best card in the world, but being able to produce some life-linking blockers just can be relevant at times. So he's just seemed like an all-around good card. I might have put him in a sideboard if I was playing best of 3, but honestly, he does enough in enough matchups that I thought I'd just put him in the main board and see how we go. I've also gone down to just 2 copies of Saw It Coming. Again, because I'm seeing so much mono white and other aggro decks, a 3-mana hard counter spell's usually not where I want to be. It hasn't been particularly helpful. In some matches, it's been great for me, but because most of what I'm seeing has been aggro, and this has been a best of 1 event so far, it was an easy enough cut to make. So, how do I feel about this deck going forward? Well, to be honest, I don't really love where the deck is at. This version of the deck, since I've been tweaking it, has been performing a little bit better for me. But to be honest, I actually prefer the earlier version of the deck that I showed you in the intro. A lot of the reason for that is that the Alchemy event, Welcome to Alchemy, has been best of 1. What I would like to do going forward is move into the best of 3 queue. Giving myself access to a proper sideboard would take a lot of the pressure off the deck that I've been trying to address, because the Welcome to Alchemy event has been best of 1 only. I've had to keep making changes to give myself answers to a wider variety of decks and strategies. The initial version of the deck I felt was more streamlined and more focused. It did very well against mid-range decks, it did very well against control decks, but it just struggled a bit too much against aggro decks. Having access to a sideboard means I can move things into the main deck to make game 1 against aggro a little bit easier, and still be able to swap into a version that's very good against mid-range and very good against control, while knowing that the deck, just in the main deck, still has the tools to combat those matchups. One other thing I would really like to do is try to lower the curve of this deck a little bit. I was hoping to be able to behold the Multiverse, foretell Behold the Multiverse, and have it as a 2-mana instant card draw spell to activate Hullbreaker Horror. More often than not, I found myself having to cast Behold the Multiverse before then to draw into cards to find a Hullbreaker Horror or to draw answers to what my opponent was doing, and I did find it a little more difficult than I wanted to trigger Hullbreaker Horror at times. To be fair, most of the times that I get a Hullbreaker Horror on board, and it isn't immediately answered or too late in the game, your opponent will concede anyway. But I did just find it a little harder to trigger than I wanted, and having to wait until turn 9 is asking a lot of the deck to be able to cast this and have 2 mana held up. And that's if I could even keep one of these in the foretell zone. This version of the deck has way more 4-drops because I'm running Behold the Multiverse and Memory Deluge. I can foretell this, but that's potentially a turn 2 or a turn 3 that I'm not really doing anything. I'm not holding up counter magic. Memory Deluge is a great card, but it does start at 4 mana. It's not always useful. Shadow's Verdict is a 5-drop. Sorin the Mirthless is a 4-drop. In the original version of the deck, I had more 1-drops in Fading Hope because of Lear. I had less 7 mana finishes and more 5 mana, and being able to get to 6 mana to cast Lear with a Fading Hope or something held up is a little more manageable. So I would like to find some ways to keep the core idea of the deck, have the right tools in my sideboard, but just lower my curve just a little bit. I also would like to include a 3rd copy of the Celestis. Because I'm trying to get to an expensive finisher and have mana held up, that little bit of ramp makes a huge difference. And the games where I get an early Celestis versus the games where I don't are like apples and oranges in terms of how the deck play. The Celestis does a lot of things that we're interested in. It gives us a little bit of life gain, gives us more card filtering, and being able to throw something like Memory Deluge into the graveyard can actually be really helpful because you're functionally just drawn a card because you still have access to flashback on the Deluge. Celestis has been great for me, and I think it should be 3 copies. I'm a bit leery of going up to 4 because it is a legendary. You don't want too many copies of it. Sometimes even with 2, I end up with both of them and it's a little bit annoying, but I do think 3 might be the right number for this sort of deck. So those are my plans with the deck moving forward. You'll probably see a little bit more of it on the channel soon. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, feel free to leave me any thoughts, comments, or opinions down there in the comment section. Please do remember to tickle that thumbs up button. But most importantly, just stay brilliant. I'm going to catch you real soon.